All right, everybody. It looks like people are slowly coming in. And we already have the first reaction. So this is exciting. We will wait a couple more minutes until more people join. But I just want to make sure that you guys may as well tell us where you're coming from. So on the right-hand side, if you're on a desktop, it should say chat, questions, or polls. And so why don't you tell us in the chat where you're actually coming from and where you're calling in from, and kind of like what your interests are. Is that livestock or is it crops, or are you on a tractor right now? Squamish, BC. Cool, yeah. I didn't know you were out in BC. So you may as well just pop that into the chat there while we're waiting for people. Albuquerque, New Mexico. Cool. Yeah, and then I will slowly maybe start talking through on how this platform actually works, because I'm Swiss myself, so I want to start this on time. Everybody is on a schedule, so we want to make sure we're going to finish in time as well. But Lee is here again from Farm Media. Cool, nice joining us again. This is great. Gord Talk from Innisfail, Alberta. Cool. Okay, so what you'll see is at the bottom, there's a little sign where you have a smiley face. When you go into that smiley face and you hear something that our presenters are saying that you really like, you can give them a thumbs up. So you'll see that at the bottom. You can also say that was really lovely what they just said. So let's make this interactive, because we want to make sure that people kind of get a bit of reactions here and what's happening. So for this webinar, we have chat section on the right-hand side. In the chat, it's more like conversational. But if you have questions for our presenters today, please put them into the questions tab. And then also, if you have, we're gonna be talking about polls. So keep an eye on that polls section as well. And last but not least, I think I probably will start bringing on Rob, who's gonna be the MC today. I know he had a rough night last night, so we'll see how his voice is gonna perform today as an MC. But Rob, it is my pleasure, first of all, to always work with you, but also to have you today MC this webinar. So why don't you come on stage and take us away for the next 58 minutes here.
Yeah, it's great to be with you guys. Everybody coming on board. See Lars Rogers there, a bunch of Lee Gord Talk, a bunch of people I know are coming on board. It's great to have you guys. This is a really interesting seminar we're going to do. It's about rangeland management, pasture management. It's about sustainability. It's about all of those things all coming together. So I'm really excited to share this time with 4 awesome experts. And the experts that we have for you are really incredible people. So we have Leanne Smith. FenceFast is a tech direct partner with AGvisorPRO. And Leanne's going to talk about how they integrate their technology to make some of these more intensive livestock operations and grazing patterns work really well. Victoria Namath is with Saskatchewan Agriculture. Saskatchewan Agriculture is now available on AGvisorPRO. So we can download AGvisorPRO and you can connect to any number of Saskatchewan experts on AGvisorPRO. Mira Van Broek is with CCAN, and CCAN's a great organization. Again, another tech direct partner with AGvisorPRO, who's available for free on the AGvisorPRO platform. And then Linda Hunt, she's going to be awesome. She's from that Vegreville, Riley area. She's going to talk to us later on as an independent expert. So we've got a really, really good roster of folks to talk to you today. So as I bring up Leanne Smith, first of all, what I want to do is draw your attention to the polls. And if Charles, if you can take off the slide, that'd be great. And welcome, Leanne, to our AGvisorPRO seminar. It's great to have you here. Your poll that goes along with your presentation is this. The poll is, Do you utilize electric fences to rotate grazing areas on your farm and your pasture? Yes or no? So those attending, please go over to the poll, which is on the right-hand side of your screen. Hit the poll button and we can get started. Now, Leanne is Vice President of Accounts and Marketing for FenceFast. She's a leader in the agricultural sector. FenceFast represents and works with many of the leading fence manufacturers around the globe. Their product lines are specifically chosen, high quality, superior results with FenceFast. Now, she's been involved in all kinds of fencing. And so you're going to take it away, Leanne. And the first question I have for you is, at the heart of FenceFast is this energizer. And I want to learn more about it. It's not a bunny, it's the energizer. And you said one of the really important things is matching the energizer to the type of livestock and environmental needs that you have on your farm. What's that all about?
You bet. You bet. So thank you very much, Rob. And I'm really excited to be here and speak about this. So for us and for me, how I'm going to present this is, like, I spent a lot of years before FenceFast in the financial world as an ag lender, having lots of conversations about how people can save money and make good decisions. And I always find that the energizer is one where people can maybe make decisions that they think they're saving money, but they aren't. So I'm going to talk about some misconceptions. So one misconception is that the bigger the animal, the bigger the energizer, which isn't always the case. So one of the questions we always ask is, what are you fencing for, to keep in and keep out? So, for example, like if you have sheep and goats, they have, hard hooves, they have lots of wool, and that can be really hard to shock, because electric fence, and the heart of it is the energizer, it's a psychological barrier. So they need that snap, they need that amount of awareness. So in lots of cases, sheep, for example, might need a bigger energizer than cattle. I am and was born and raised in Saskatchewan. It's where I still spend half my time. And another concept is that, like, for example, where I am an hour north of Regina, or where I am here in Squamish, BC right now doing a fence job, or where I am in the Lower Mainland, those growing conditions can really impact. So that's another thing we want to talk about.
So yeah, the energizer really is the regulator that puts the power into the fence, right? And so what you're saying is that people should talk to you before they make a decision on this, because I never thought that, it makes sense now. If you have wool, that's going to be an insulator. You may need a stronger energizer.
Yes. And the other thing that I see all the time that people, and I did this, like hands up, I did this, was that they, maybe they have right now, 160 acres, but right now they only want to do rotational grazing of this piece, right? That's like 20 acres. So they buy an energizer for 20 acres, not thinking about, like maybe next I want to do 40 acres or the whole 100, right? So always, if you're buying multiple, that's going to be more money. So if you can think about what is the most you'd ever need, and if that budget allows, buy for what's possible, or if you own a section there, and that might be what you ever want to put an energizer on, think about that, or have a conversation about that. Because people kind of think they can.
Can we use the energizer on an existing conventional fence? Can we retrofit?
Yes. So that is one thing that I didn't know until I started working for FenceFast. It wasn't something common in our area, but there is offsets that you can put on a conventional barbed wire fence, for example. So that can be used to actually just retrofit. It can be used on a new fence to protect your capital investment longer. It can be used if you're buying properties, for example, and you need to do fencing, but you can't, or for time, money, can't do it all at once, or you just want to put a hot wire around so you can do rotational grazing. Like, that's the best way. Wow. So it's also cheaper. It's a very economical way of doing it than lots of cases, in lots
One of the
cases.
things
It always
we can
comes down to individual.
Yeah, one of the things we can do with AGvisorPRO is we can put people in touch with you instantaneously on the platform. What are some of the common electrical fence issues that you deal with, or when you're coaching people? What are some of the common issues that you come up with, Leanne?
Well, 80% worldwide of electric fence problems comes down to grounding. So now put your, like, this is like hand up. I did this until I knew better. Was I used as a ground rod a rebar, maybe a rusty old piece of rebar. So that rust or rebar isn't conductive. So what we recommend for conductivity is either something galvanized or stainless steel. So if you're using something that isn't that, you can actually jeopardize the longevity or the effectiveness of your entire fence system. So literally for $20, often that's what you are coming down to. So people, you maybe don't know what you don't know, right? But that is often that's always our first troubleshooting, is what are you using for grounding? And then a rule of thumb is often 1 ground rod for every 2 joules of energizer. So it can be a quick fix.
Good. Well, this is awesome, Leanne. We're going to let you go. Thank you very, very much for your time. And I'm going to bring up our next expert, Victoria Namath, and we'll welcome Leanne back at the end. If you guys have got any questions, we've got Nate all the way from Iowa with us today. So that's great. This is Victoria Namath, and her poll that goes along with Victoria's talk is how much moisture conditions influence the grazing decisions. Do they make an impact in terms of significant influence and you adjust grazing, or do they make minimal influence and you don't pay a lot of attention and then the animals just roam? Now, Victoria is passionate about helping producers with on-farm projects to improve sustainability. She's an agri-environmental specialist. She works with farmers and ranches to implement environmental practices. She works with Saskatchewan agriculture, a bachelor's from the University of Saskatchewan, a minor in rangeland management, a major in agronomy, lots of expertise. And Victoria, one of the things I wanted to talk to you about is native rangeland grazing management. And, parts of Saskatchewan, parts of Western Canada are pretty dry right now. Well, talk to us about what we should be thinking about as we look at this. I mean, rain can come, but right now, a lot of people are pretty dry.
Definitely. Thanks so much, Rob, and thanks for having me on today. Yeah, so definitely we are experiencing dry conditions in Saskatchewan and throughout Western Canada. So it's really important when we think about our native rangeland to know what condition of health it was in before we started experiencing these dry conditions, because that's really going to affect how we manage it after we're experiencing these conditions. So when we think about pasture health, we can rate it as healthy, healthy with problems, or unhealthy. So as an example, if we have a healthy rangeland, we're going to have a lot of litter. Our plants are going to be very vigorous, and we're going to have, a good root system on. So it's going to be more resilient to dry conditions. But we still have to adjust for that. So if we are experiencing dry conditions, we want to make sure we're lowering our stocking rates to match the production that's happening, because our native grasses will go dormant when we're experiencing dry conditions. So that's one thing to think about. So if we have a healthy with problems native rangeland, we might see less litter, more bare patches. We might be looking at starting to rest, some of our rangelands. Maybe we're going to have to consistently lower our stocking rates too after we're starting to receive moisture again as well, just to make sure we're getting the health back on that rangeland so that they are resilient going into the future. And then, of course, if we have an unhealthy rangeland, we might see not very much litter. We might be seeing a lot of bare soil, some weedy species coming in. That's where we're starting to look at, we might have to completely rest that pasture for several years in order to get the species back up and growing, of course, depending how much moisture we get. So very important to kind of know what our pastures look like going into dry conditions and then managing according to that.
So you said that there's healthy Healthy with problems kind of describes me, I guess. Healthy with problems, I got problems. And then you have problem. When you're going in, I'll go to the second question right away, but when you go in to assess the root health of a pasture land, how do you do that? Like what are the things you're looking for?
Definitely. So there is a health assessment guide that we do follow, and it kind of looks at two main categories. So we're looking at our plant community and how the vegetation is doing, and then we're looking at things like soil erosion and animal impact. So when we go out to the field, we're going to be looking at what plants are there, and based on, you know, what plants should be there, that's kind of determining, of course, you know, if you have heavier grazing, you're going to see different species showing up depending how they do respond to grazing. And then, yeah, evaluating, you know, if we have a lot of overutilization, we might be seeing a lot of bare ground, not as much litter level. And litter is another important thing we look at. So that's like the dead plant biomass that covers the soil. So it really helps with temperature fluctuations and in keeping moisture in, which is very important during dry conditions to be able to, you know, hold in any moisture that we could potentially get.
You know, I can see us using AGvisorPRO because I can actually go to the field and show you what I'm seeing in the pasture without you having to get all the way out there. And it could be a real good coaching thing. With the drier conditions, Victoria, I'm sorry, drier conditions, Victoria, a lot of people might be pushing livestock into riparian areas. Can you talk a little bit about managing these riparian areas for production and environmental, environmental benefits of the, you know, if you're gonna make use of it, how do we do that?
Definitely. So riparian areas are another really important part of native rangeland. They make up a smaller portion than the rest of our upland areas, but from a production standpoint, if we have riparian areas that are managed well, they can produce 3 to 4 times the production that our upland areas do. Now, as I said, granted, they make up a smaller area of the landscape, but in riparian areas, they provide environmental benefits as well. So things like, you know, buffering water, they really help with our water quality, which is really important in dry years as well. Or if we have any runoff from neighboring fields, you know, we've got plant biomass to help mitigate that. And they also help with retaining water too. So not only recharging our groundwater and aquifers, but if we have vegetation along our plant banks, they can help to slow down the flow of water so that water can get absorbed. And it provides, you know, a source of, water for our livestock, and that allows production for our livestock too. So it's really important to, manage them well.
Well, I would think that in this kind of a year, if I was a livestock producer, actually I have cattle in Saskatchewan. I have some in the Lanigan area, and I think that you're going to be pretty busy with calls. And so again, I wanted to mention that folks could reach Victoria and Saskatchewan Agriculture and AGvisorPRO. A lot of people don't know that Saskatchewan Agriculture is there. So Victoria, we're going to let you go and bring up the next guest, and we'll bring you back at the end of it all. But thank you very much, Victoria. Really, really insightful stuff. That's great. I'm going to ask Mira Van Berk to come up now, and Mira is with CCAN. And Mira's poll that goes along with her presentation is this. Have you done trials with different forage seed varieties on your farm? In other words, have you tested this out? Yes, we tried it, or no, we have our own champion and we listen to. So Mira Van Berk works with Southern Alberta, Southern Saskatchewan, and U.S. CCAN manufacturers to increase awareness of CCAN products. She provides technical support, coordinates local activities. CCAN is big. They're the largest supplier of certified seed to Canada, and they have over 600 independent businesses. And, you've got a lot of products that you kind of can coach people on. They can reach you on AGvisorPRO. Tell me a little bit about CDC Haymaker. I think the quote is, it's an ugly kernel, but cows love it. So what is it about CDC Haymaker that we should know, Mira?
Yeah, so that quote was said to me by a seed grower, and I just thought it was so funny because he's like, I don't understand why I put Haymaker in every year because it just looks so big and ugly, but the cows just love it. So I just thought that was honestly the perfect quote because where we have our variety trials so Ag in Motion normally is our big site always haymaker is always the tallest, biggest, showiest plant. And especially this year, that might be a really good thing because it's so dry everywhere. It might not get that tall, but the palatability of it, it has a softer stem, so less fiber for the animals, so they seem to really like it. It is a higher forage yield, more than the CDC baler, about 7%, but people, like it says in this poll here, know we have our champion. Haymaker is usually the champion for forage oats.
So what is CDC haymaker? What is it? It's a special grass, or tell me a little bit about it. What is it? Is it a mix or what?
Yes. No, so it's just a forage oat, and it's got to be older than me. Like, it's an old variety, but
is it older than me?
No, I wouldn't say it's older than me. You put me in a hard spot there. But yeah, so it is a forage oat. So there's the milling oats or there's the forage oat, and haymaker was specifically meant for forages, and it was replacing CDC baler, which was an older variety, and it comes out of Crop Development Center out of University of Saskatchewan, and it's kind of like the tried and true for a forage oat variety.
Right, that's really good. And now you have another one, a CDC Maverick. It's a tried and true forage barley with low inputs. Can you talk a little bit about CDC Maverick?
So CDC Maverick, again, is consistently a champion on farms, and it basically is a smooth on 2-row barley. So there's a 2-row barley or 6-row barleys, and sometimes the 6-row forage yields, they tend to thin out in drier years. So the 2 rows does really well, especially Maverick does really well on low inputs, low fertility, in dry conditions, which I think we're going to be unfortunately having this year. And it's just consistent. So again, that is what people go towards for a forage variety for barley. And lots of people mix the two. So they do like a blend. So they blend some haymaker also with Maverick. Yeah.
How heavy do you seed these things, Mira? If you're going to advise me on Maverick or haymaker, how hard do I push the population?
So it just depends. It really depends where you're at. So if you're in, I don't know specific numbers, but if you're in a higher moisture area, you can definitely push it more for a higher plant population. But unfortunately, and the other ladies on the call would know better than me, but forage people tend to not really push it. They want kind of that lower fertility. They want less inputs because it's less money. At least that's my experience with forage people. So they tend not to push those plant populations, but it really just depends on your area. But yeah.
Building on the conversation we had just a little while ago with Victoria and my agronomic background and knowing the agronomics of oats and knowing the fact that in a droughty situation, potassium is really important for oats. In fact, oats takes out more potassium per bushel than it does nitrogen. It would be really, really good to hammer the K at it. And at the same time, the potassium increases the drought tolerance of those crops, and it's less money than some of the other inputs out there. So that's really, really good. Listen, this was really, really good. And I know that CCAN is on AGvisorPRO. You're one of the experts on AGvisorPRO. So if anybody here on watching the seminar live or later on the recorded one, download AGvisorPRO and reach out to the CCAN people. We've got a variety, I think, Mira. We've got oilseed specialists, we've got cereal specialists, and you're leaning towards the forage side of things, right?
Yeah, so we kind of mainly focus on cereals, but we do have some annual forages. And one thing I will say is there's a lot of new varieties coming out, even some guys that are doing forage seed, but even for cereals and everything else. All I can recommend for you is to just do trials. We just had an interesting conversation today with a customer. He got out of some oats because he's like, well, I don't know if my cows are going to like this variety of oats. And we said, well, you got to try it. The book says one thing, but you got to try it on your farm, do different varieties, kind of test it out, and then find your own kind of champion. So
yeah, well, you've got so many different things to choose from. Thanks a lot for your insights. We're going to let you go, and I'm going to bring Linda Hunt to the stage. And Linda's poll, so for Linda's presentation, in the poll section, folks, the poll is, do you fertilize? And I led into this, I guess. Do you fertilize your pasture or native hay land? Yes, I currently do or have, or no, let's let the rain and the sunshine take care of it. So we're going to ask the people to go to the poll and do that. Linda is kind of from my hood. I grew up in Innisfree, and Linda's in that Vegreville, Riley area. She's an independent forage and livestock agrologist, most recently with Alberta Agriculture. She resides in that northeastern part of Alberta, been helping farmers in that area in northern Saskatchewan on grazing. And we're going to talk about rejuvenation and regenerative, I think, a little bit, forage establishment. You're a fifth generation farmer, a BSc in agriculture, and your favorite moment is developing continuing education courses at Lakeland with Josie Van Lent and all those folks. That's great. So, Linda, the first comment was a lot of people, well, I don't think they abuse, but they don't necessarily look after their forages and their perennials. Talk to us about why we should look at this as a crop and take care of it.
Well, forages are a crop. That's just a fact. So they actually occupy more of our arable farmland than any other crop, way more than even wheat. So it's our biggest crop by volume and by area in Canada. So there's a few pieces of research that I look into to get some of these stats. But our forage industry in Canada, there's a National Forage and Grassland Assessment that was done in 2012. And they assessed our forage industry at $5 billion and makes it the third largest crop after canola and wheat.
Really?
Yeah, believe it or not. Like, I was like blown away. Who knew, right?
$5 billion in the province of Alberta, right?
No, in Canada. This is a Canada one. And I can't remember what the Alberta stat was.
Okay.
They also looked at, there was another study done, and they looked at the volume of the crop in Canada, and we actually produce over 70 million acres between the natural grazing lands and the cultivated forage. And so if we compare the amount of cultivated land that's tied up in forages, we have about 34 million acres compared to wheat, which is about 20 million acres across Canada. So it is a crop. It is our most important crop. Wow. In my opinion, of course, my humble opinion. But it's interesting because it's not the kind of crop where you put in some inputs, you get some outputs, and so you can see every year in your income tax, this is how much it cost, and this is what I got in my bank account. It's a hypothetical accounting exercise to know the value of your forage. 90% or 95% across Canada, it's 95% of our forages never get to market. We just feed them to our animals. There's about 15% on a Canadian scale that actually gets traded on the market. In Alberta, that'll be a little bit higher. But really, our market is set on such a small amount of...
That's remarkable. 34 million acres of forages that basically, can't really grow crop. It's designed to grow cellulose and hemicellulose, and that we turn into meat and milk and wool and those other products. Yep. So when you're advising growers on establishing some forages, talk to me about seed rate. Talk to me about alfalfa and disease resistance and those kind of things. How do we make some of the selections like Mira was just talking about with Secan and the haymaker and stuff like that?
Well, annuals are a little bit different than perennials, but if we go into the perennial side of stuff, there's a ton of stuff that's coming in on our public breeding programs. It's a little bit slower than our private breeding programs, but there's stuff coming out on both sides. With the private or breeding programs, there tends to be a lot of imported seeds that get tested in Alberta, and then they do really well. And the best part about them is their disease-resistant package. So especially for alfalfa, which has all the diseases of canola and all the pests of peas, it's kind of important to know what diseases are out there because we're managing these crops for 8 or 10 years, right? That's the goal of the forage guy. Most crops, forage crops that are cultivated, we're looking at 6 years, and after that, the cost of production kind of drops off. And so going for that 8 or 10, if you're a really good manager, maybe you can make it work, but most people can't. So we're managing it for about 6 years. So you want those plants to have a good disease package that they can handle those 6 years, considering all the annual crops and all the disease pressures that are around, right? So we look at different, how to select them. We look at your site conditions. We will look at how you want to use them. We look at, there's lots of considerations.
One of the real gaps that I saw with respect to establishing forages was just a lack of information around soil tests. So can you comment a little bit about how important that is going into either a perennial or annual situation?
Yeah, in a perennial situation, it's super important because we know the price points of being able to add a fertilizer every year to a perennial forage crop aren't always there. And so you want to know, you want to kind of top load the ones that are slower to move through the system. And a lot of perennials, they'll use the phosphorus and the potassiums differently than an annual crop. So making sure you have that really good balanced soil at the beginning with enough nitrogen to get everything started. And most of the forage crops we're putting in are grass and legumes, so you don't want to have it too high on the nitrogen side because you really want that establishment. And so like it is really important to have that. And actually I say for establishment, you should start upwards of 2 seasons ahead of time planning for that. Because when you have perennials, you're talking about perennial weeds issues that you might want to address. We have gophers and moles and rough sites that we want to look at, right? Like there's a lot of things to consider, and soils are one of them. And what we tend to have is if you manage your perennials over 6 years, by the time you get to that 6th year, the reason that production is starting to drop off is because that nutrients aren't there anymore. And so you really want to have really good nutrients at the top end, and then add those ones that are more, that move through the soil a little bit faster as you go along. And you're going to adjust them as you go along, and the plant community changes over time, right? And you have to adjust to the weather, and it's a complete science, and it's pretty fun.
Well, this is fascinating. What you just said there is really interesting. It makes sense to me too, that as a population matures, as you get into that 4th and 5th and 6th year, the plant dynamics changes. So as an agronomist working, you would change your fertility focus, wouldn't you?
Absolutely. Yeah. Especially if you're in a situation where you're losing legume over time, which a lot of the areas tend to, then you would increase your nitrogen over time, right? Or if you see your legume is going down and you're only in year 3 and you want it to last another 3 years, then you might be doing some soil tests and adding a little bit more sulfur or potassium, or, like just to give them a boost, right? Because they use a lot of those legumes.
Can you, I've got just a minute left. Could you make a quick comment on the breeding going on right now between oats and barley and some of them? And I mean, Mira talked about it quickly, but being selected for forages?
Yeah, like the barley breeding program at the Field Crop Development Center is what I know the most. But I did phone all the other breeding programs too to get a tap into what they were up to. And what I found was that we don't breed for forage. We breed for something that has a check off, because that's how the breeders get their money, right? And so then when they get one that's like particularly leafy and looks really good, then they're like, oh, that's a forage variety. And they slap a cowboy name on it and they chuck it out the door. And that is a fact. I talked to the breeders, and that is exactly what they did. But in Lacombe, it was different because we have Vern Barron, and Vern Barron was like, yeah, there's got to be a better way. And so working with the Field Crop Development Center and AFSC, they made a model to predict, based on the breeders' indicators of their varieties, whether or not it will be good for forage. So they tested a whole bunch of barleys through these cows. They made this model. They've been testing and developing it, and the breeders started selecting their varieties based on this model. And so we have 2 amazing varieties of barley that came out, and that's the AB Cadillac and the AB Advantage. And they are 6-row, smooth-on and forage varieties, and they're awesome.
All right. Before I step into it, are they available through CCAN? Is that how they?
They are available. I'm not sure if they're at CCAN. I think one of them is.
Mira when she comes back. I'm going to invite Mira and Victoria and Leanne back to the stage here right now, and I'm going to lead us into a bit of a group discussion here on forages. This has been really, really cool. What I want to do is, there has been, the vilification of the livestock sector, especially when it comes to greenhouse gases. And if you understand what livestock do, especially We've got 2/3 of agricultural land that will never grow a crop. It's great at growing cellulose, hemicellulose, and ruminants turn that into protein for human beings. And ruminants eat carbon that's in the plants from the carbon dioxide through photosynthesis, and they cycle it. Essentially, it's all old carbon. It's not new carbon. But there is an awakening right now under the terminology agroecology, sustainable, regenerative, all of those kind of things. Victoria, as you're advising farmers, I mean, the media is picking up on these terminology, regenerative, sustainable, agroecology, which I think is great because it focuses attention on things that as agronomists we've been doing for a long time. What's your take on this movement in this direction where we're having the opportunity to actually converse about the integration of livestock? And what does that whole thing mean to you, that movement?
I think it's a really great conversation to have, between livestock producers and even with the public, showing, how they're utilizing, from a native rangeland perspective, right? How they're utilizing these native rangelands that are here, and, how the livestock are good on the landscape, and how, they can play a role in, carbon sequestration and being sustainable. And I think it's just really important for livestock producers to get their story out there too, right? To show, the good management practices that are happening out on the landscape, for sure.
Mira, when you consider CCAN, and I hope I didn't step too deep into the pile of poop here. I don't know if you handle those varieties that Linda was talking about, but can you talk to me a little bit about CCAN and whether or not its focus is decreasing? Is livestock and forages and pasture seed getting its fair share of attention?
I want to say yes, but unfortunately it's not. And that is an interesting fact from Linda there, saying that it is the third highest. I didn't know that. That's awesome. But
yes, it is.
Yeah, so we do work very closely with FCDC. Joseph, I met Joseph as well. He is the breeder of the AB Advantage. And this is the first year on the market this year, the AB Advantage, and it is a 6-row. It is smooth on. It's a beautiful variety. If you see it in the field, it looks phenomenal. But yeah, annuals for us kind of does fall to the wayside a little bit. And being the newbie at the CCAN crew, I don't spend too much time on it. But now Linda's making me think I gotta spend way more time on it.
Yeah, that's great. One of the things that we're hoping with AGvisorPRO is even the connection between you folks, a business to business connection. Linda, when you consider the conversation around regenerative ag or agroecology, but regenerative ag, a lot of it goes along with intensive pasteurization. In other words, I don't think that's the right word. Intensive grazing, where you move the cattle or you move the livestock in tight groups and you move them from place to place to place. Can you talk a little bit on why that bears more looking into, if it does?
Yeah, actually, the U of A is doing a huge intensive study on that. It's called AMP grazing. So and they're looking at it and the effect it has on carbon sequestration in the soil. And what they are finding is with sufficient rest after a high intensive, it was also called high intensive low frequency grazing, same idea. So you get in there, you graze it all off, and then you move them. And it takes about 3 days for things to start to grow back, and you don't want them to have that second bite. So you move them on faster. And then you let it 60 days worth of regrowth on that. And what they're finding it does is that it stimulates the grasses to grow, gives them lots of time to put in new roots, and it just keeps them really vegetative and happy. And so there's a lot, and they're seeing that there is carbon being stored under those plants. However, if you are trying to manage them for biodiversity in a rangeland situation where it's important to you to have certain types of plants, what they find is over time you lose some of those more brittle plants, and you end up with more like Kentucky bluegrass. Kentucky bluegrass puts in a lot of carbon into the soil, but its roots aren't that long, right? It's not really good. It goes dormant right when it's dry, right? So you have to decide what you're managing for, and you have to be careful about that. But there is some evidence that we can sequester carbon in soils with that kind of grazing system. The trick is people being able to apply it appropriately. You have to have really good discipline not to take those cattle and put them back in there before it's really recovered. And so those long recovery days are really hard for smaller producers that have a smaller land base. Well, but you can intensify it for sure.
Unless you can cut up your land quickly. This is a lob ball. I'm lobbing this to Leanne right now. But Leanne, when you listen to that sort of amp grazing or high intensity, low frequency grazing, this is like a lob ball to you. Like how does fence fast fit into this?
Well, exactly. Like this is what we do. I spent a lot of time learning this, doing this. We worked actually with Kwantlen Polytechnic in Tsawwassen. They were doing it too with intensive grazing with pigs, trying to get soil. The soil had been only grow potatoes for like 50 years or something, and the soil was absolute, trash. So they were doing it for soil health and really focusing on that. For me, I was looking at the forage regrowth. Like that's where I was like so amazed by. But that is really what we do, because it you can take, like, for example, in the Lower Mainland, where the price of every piece of land, every little chunk of land is so much, right? It matters. And it matters in a drought too. So intensive grazing and moving and using it more efficiently. So you have, you start growing grass and raising grass and then having your animals harvest it. That's what we want to help you do.
Before I go to Victoria, I have a follow-up for you, Victoria. But Leanne, if I'm in the middle of nowhere and I don't have electricity, is it battery and solar powered, the energizers? Is that what it is?
Yes. So there's options, like there's solar, there's plug-in, or there's ones that can convert back and forth. So everyone always wants solar. We always say that if you have an option, plug-in is more bang for your buck, cheaper, more output. But yeah, you can go full solar, middle of nowhere, and have options.
That's good. Thank you. Victoria, I want to bounce off of Linda's comment. So I'm getting something here that if we're managing amp grazing, you may want to grab some Amira's seed and put that in and really graze that intensively. But talk to me a little bit about native pasture land, and does that philosophy wash on native pasture land, and how long would we have to let that land rest before we put the livestock back through it again?
Definitely. So I know there is more research happening on, intensively grazing native rangeland to see how it will respond, because traditionally, native rangeland is continuously grazed throughout the season. I do know producers who will rotationally graze, and that, seems to work. So you minimize the amount of selection that the cattle are doing. So you get a more even graze, and then you can flip them to another pasture while the one that was just grazed is able to rest. If you have adequate moisture, depending on the species, I think, 30 or so days, depending how well it grows back too, right? If you want to make sure you get enough leaf material so that your plants can put carbohydrates back into their roots so that they're going to, maintain being productive so that you're not overutilizing it. So
what are you looking for signs when it's okay to put the livestock back on a previously grazed area?
Definitely. So, typically for grazing, we like to say at least the 4-leaf stage if you're looking at the start of the season. And then as you're grazing, we like to say at least take half, leave half. So even when you are grazing, you don't want to completely clear it all off, because you don't want your plants to completely have to start over. So yeah, depending, some legumes, like, if you're, 6 inches tall, depending how much rain you get too, and what part of the province or part of Western Canada you're into with the species. But
Linda, when we're doing this kind of grazing, water is always in my mind here. And are there any tips or tricks that producers, growers, ranchers are using to do this movement of livestock and still provide access to water? How does that work?
Well, there's lots of different systems. I know the pipelines tend to be really cheap if you have a dugout or a nice source for water, but there's lots of different things people do. We have the solar pumps that you can move around and put into whatever little puddle you want to pump water out of. There's lots of different ways. I know one guy, he's got an old rock picker and he made it into a portable trough and uses that and drags it around, puts a solar panel on it. I mean, there's just a million different things. And there's a company called Pasture Pipelines, and he's out of Sherwood Park. And that's all he does is go around and string the pipelines for you. So like there's tons of options. It can be very expensive to set up. That's the thing about AMP grazing is the fencing and the waterer and moving the cattle. It's very labor intensive. So it can be very expensive to get started. And so you really have to have in mind what your goals are. And if that carbon sequestration is something you're going for, then well, there you go. Have fun. But
Mira, when you think about carbon, this is a total offside question. You may not have a real, but when you're looking at the different varieties of forages that you could sell, you've been in the field digging up. What is it? I was just trying to get haymaker and maverick. What are the root masses like in those crops? Are they real big root mass?
That's a good question. I actually have never been out and looked at the root masses of those. I have never seen that.
Okay. Linda, have you?
On different annuals, I've looked, not on those ones specifically, but the annuals that are grown for forage, because they get to grow longer, tend to have pretty decent root systems. Our meteorologists in Alberta Ag, when they do their yield potential based on soil moisture, they go down like 10 feet for cereals. So cereals growing for forage are going to have that deep rooting system.
Back in the AgriTrend days, this was a staple for us. We would grab a backhoe and we would dig in a soil pit. We'd show farmers how deep the roots grow in field, and it often was down 4, 5, 6 feet deep. And people would say, "Bullshit! You can't have roots going down that deep." Well, here it is. They're actively white and they're growing. So it's a really good thing to show people. Listen, we're winding down our time. I'm going to give everybody a chance just to wind up a little bit. You're all available on AgvisorPRO. That's why we're doing this. We're encouraging the people that are here or watching this later on to download our app. Leanne and Victoria, give us a takeaway, and then we'll go to Mira and Linda. So, Leanne, quick takeaway.
The quick takeaway is we'd love to connect. I'd love to connect on AgvisorPRO. We spend a lot of time with people sending pictures or anything so we can get a good solution. So AgvisorPRO makes it so much easier than anything. It's perfect to get the solution for your individual situation.
Yeah, thanks a lot. That really is what we're trying to do. Victoria, your thoughts as we wrap up this section on forages and perennial pastures and stuff?
Definitely. Yeah, same as Leanne. You know, I'm available on AgvisorPRO. As Rob said before, if you're out in your field and not sure what a plant is and, you know, your native stand, you can snap a picture, send it my way. And, you know, if there's any Saskatchewan producers out there who are looking for some programs and services that we provide, you can connect with me on AgvisorPRO as well. So.
Yeah, you know, I got to give full credit to your minister, David Merritt, who I know very well, your deputy minister, Rick Burton. You know, it's always a leap of faith to take a chance with us. I know we're talking to other jurisdictions right now to bring them on AgvisorPRO. I just want to give you guys thumbs up and thank you for doing that. Mira, you're one of the first companies, one of the first seed companies on AgvisorPRO. I want to thank you for being with us.
Yeah, no, it's been awesome. There was a question in the chat about seed costs, and I know when everyone hears seed, they always think of the cost and the cost of everything, but all I can suggest is whatever your tried and true, your champion is, stick with that. If they like it, if your cows and everything like it, but then just try something else for 1 year and always compare the two, because it always seems like don't seed the whole farm to it, just do the comparison. And then after that, you can make a smarter decision. So yeah, thanks for having me. And then hopefully learn some more about forages, maybe through AgvisorPRO.
Yeah, I think we're all learning something about that. Linda, a final word to you before we bring Patrick on, and that is, You're an independent advisor, formerly with Alberta Agriculture, but now you're getting paid for your knowledge and wisdom, and I can just tell there's a ton of it there. Your thoughts as we wind up, and a little bit about the idea of AGvisorPRO, and this pretty esoteric what we're trying to build here, but I think it's got legs.
So I guess in conclusion, that forages are a crop. Treat them like they are. If you want good production and animal performance, you have to give them good quality feed and a lot of it. So manage your forages for quality and manage them for quantity, and pick newer varieties and don't skimp out on your establishment. Those are my takeaways. AGvisor, I think, is a cool idea. I've been watching you guys since you started. So I'm interested to see how this will go on the forage and livestock side of things, but I think it's a good idea.
Well, we're agnostic. So whether you're a beekeeper or you're involved in mechanical stuff or you're involved in forages, we effectively can put you on the farm without you having to go on the farm. So that's the idea. Anyway, I want to thank you all for being with us. And so I'm going to invite Patrick. We'll let you guys get off the stage. We're going to invite Patrick Walter to the stage and wrap things up. Thanks, everybody. It was a delight. Really, really learned a lot. Patrick?
By far, yeah, this is by far the best webinar I think that we put on so far. So if there's anyone, like by far, right, Rod, if there's anyone today on this call that thought this was a really good session, you know what? You can share it with all of your friends.
I think that Lee Hart's got a bunch of stuff to write up after this.
Yeah, I think so too. We'll keep him busy. But yeah, Rob, I mean, thanks very much for emceeing this. As we do this, we're just legitimately take about 1 or 2 minutes to just tell you on how AGvisorPRO works. So there should be coming a button right now where it says download AGvisorPRO. So while you're clicking onto that button, it brings you to the App Store. It will take you 30 seconds to download it. During those 30 seconds, I will quickly talk you through on how this actually works. So how easy it is. So I'm going to take myself off video just for bandwidth purposes, and then show you under a minute on how you could talk to Linda or Leanne, etc. So just bear with me 1 second here. So you would have asked on how to get in contact with Victoria, for example, or Leanne, or Mira, or Linda. Well, it is very easy. You download AGvisorPRO, you click in here, and you start typing Victoria, and you see there are topics, experts, and tech directs. And we go now under Victoria. We can see her bio. We can go look at her expertise. But really what you want to know is how can you now get connected with Victoria? Well, it's as easy as either call now here, or you can just click the button schedule as well. You can go in here and you select the date. So let's say Wednesday the 12th. And then you select the time. Let's say we do this at 4 o'clock, pick start time, and you send that session request. That's as easy as it is. It is free. Why not try it? Why not having a one-on-one with either one of those that we have on today's session? So, thanks very much. Promised it was very short, and so we're gonna give you back about 6-7 minutes of your life. But before we do that, let's make sure you have downloaded AGvisorPRO. And more importantly, this is the important stuff. We talked today to Fence Fast. There are so many companies on this platform right now. If you're having GPS issues, for example, during seeding, maybe talk to Verchak. There's Taurus, there's Point Forward Solutions, MNP. It really is as broad as it gets. So you can go from business management to what we heard today, livestock, all the way to agronomy. And it is all for free. Try it out. And with that, we will have more of these kind of like informational webinars. If you have any questions for us, or if there's anything that you think we should do better, we'd love to hear it. Always can connect with us over AGvisorPRO, obviously. So the entire team is on AGvisorPRO as well. And with that, I say thank you very much for sticking around. It really means a lot to us because we all know you guys are busy. Rob, if you want to, oh, here you are. You're on the stage again.
Yeah, I just wanted to say to all the people there, like Gord Tulk and all those guys, load AGvisorPRO and hit me on AGvisorPRO, because you can connect with me for free and check out the technology. We're evolving AGvisorPRO at a very rapid rate. There's still lots of work to be done, but we're all available. All the AGvisorPRO people are available for free on AGvisorPRO. So hit us up. It'd be great to talk to you. I'm gone again, Patrick. I'm leaving the stage.
Well, no, that's it. We're saying bye anyways. With that, from Calgary to the world, thanks very much for sticking around, and we'll wish you a safe season. Thanks for doing the work. Catch you guys later.